Hello, you're watching Transbrations. I'm your host, nahshondion. Today's special guest is Naomi RaMona Schliesman. She's an award-winning interdisciplinary artist with over 25 years of experience. She has exhibited her work nationally and internationally. She received an MFA degree from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and a BFA degree with an emphasis in sculpture from Minnesota State University Moorhead. Schliesman has received a fellowship from Ragdale and Kimmel Nelson Center for the Arts and was awarded second place for Miami University Young Sculptors competition for William and Dorothy Yeck Award, and was a LEAP finalist for the Society of Contemporary Craft Award. She has traveled abroad, has done artist residencies nationally and internationally. Schliesman taught 2D and 3D design and was the gallery director for the School of Arts at Minnesota State University Moorhead from 2011 to 2013. She was the artist development director for rural programming at Springboard for the Arts in Fergus Falls, Minnesota from 2013 to 2020, where she managed the Hinge Arts at the Kirkbride Residency Program, facilitated the Work of Art Business Skills for Artists workshops, artist development panels, and mentored artists across the United States through one-on-one artist career consultations. Schliesman serves on numerous boards and committees in her community, and she resides in rural Minnesota and continues her studio art practice and freelance work. She is a contracted artist career consultant and Work of Art Business Skills for Artists facilitator for Springboard for the Arts, a teaching artist for Kadatz Galleries, and the gallery curator and arts calendar editor at Lake Region Arts Council, and the personal executive assistant to Jeff Zachman at Zachman Studios. Earlier, you mentioned you've been referencing Springboard for quite some bit because you've worked with them. Tell us about your involvement with Springboard for the Arts and what led you to the organization.
This is a great question because when I moved back home in 2011, I was teaching at Minnesota State University Moorhead, where I taught the 2D and 3D design and was their gallery director. And then I met Michelle Anderson, who is the rural program director here in Fergus Falls. And that is where she received a grant from the NEA, which was based around the Kirkbride and the community. Because at that time, the Kirkbride building, where you actually came to stay at the Hinge Art Residency, was first supported by the NEA for this community development project where they had a play that was performed all the way around the building. And Springboard was hiring an artist organizer for that. And I was chosen for that project. And at that time, I was still working at the university, but also doing the artist organizer for them. And after doing that, after 6 months with them, they offered a part-time position for me to join them at Springboard. And that's when I decided to leave academia and then actually start working as staff at Springboard here in Fergus Falls. And then it was about 9 months after that, that's where then I was hired on as the artist organizer, and then within the next year promoted to the artist development director for Springboard programming. And that's where Michelle Anderson and I worked together to create the Hinge Art Residency program. And we flew out to Denver at the Alliance of Artists Community Conference in Denver. And we were talking about how we were in the works, getting the apartment ready because they were remodeling the one building where the artists were going to be living. And we gave a presentation on it. And that's when I met you. And you were actually in the audience that day listening to our presentation. And I was talking about how my role was working with contractors and getting everything organized and set up and helping to design the program so that with my experiences, because I was able to do residencies nationally and worldwide, and doing them and knowing like what worked well, what didn't, that is where I was, it was a very important role for me to help create Hinge Arts, which is a program that I'll hold near and dear to my heart because I worked with over 100 different artists in that program. And then not only that, that's where you and I met. And we created that professional, relationship, and now also our friendship as well afterwards.
Hinge Arts at the Kirkbride was a community development and artist residency program in Fergus Falls that created opportunities where artists and community members gathered to explore themes of transition, connection, and innovation inspired by the community's 129 years of hosting a state mental institution. The name Hinge was inspired by a belief that artists play a key role in connecting the past with the future. And Hinge is now closed.
Hinge, yes, was dissolved after pandemic because in August of 2020, I left my position at Springboard for the Arts with the pandemic, and then also wanting to be starting my own freelancing, which I am so thankful for at this time that has been so successful and working. And then also I've been able to continue to freelance for Springboard through artist career consultations and also teaching their work of art series, which is business skills for artists.
Mhm.
And for me, it's been something that has been so influential, I feel, within our community and such a positive thing for the arts community
Mhm.
that it's something that is sad that it's gone away, but I totally understand why. The transition.
I get to talk to fascinating, amazing, and inspiring artists daily. I love my job. Um, you do not learn the business side of things in art school or with your art degree. That is why I'm passionate about the work of art series that I facilitate for Springboard for the Arts. These workshops provide artists with essential tools and resources to learn about the basics of what you need to have as an art business. Each unit is descriptive and helps to lay out the foundation to build an art career. These are step-by-step, indeed, tools and resources that are all in one book. What is the name of the book again?
So it's called The Work of Art, Business Skills for Artists. And it's a 12-unit series, which Springboard for the Arts teaches. They have facilitators facilitate it online. And then also they have in-person workshops. And then they also every year offer a national intensive training program for others to learn about the Work of Art series and how to implement it within their communities and to actually train artists and other facilitators how to facilitate and integrate it into their arts communities and how it'll benefit them. And one of the most important things I want to say about the work of art for business skills is that you're absolutely right. In college and art school, you don't learn about the business side of running an art career. You need to know about accounting, you need to know about
I was
marketing.
quoting you. That was your quote.
No, I know.
I
That's
was like,
that like I like want to express like how important that is because you don't learn about that in art school. And the thing is I hope they're starting to transition that because you need to know about accounting. You need to be
Mhm.
knowing about the promoting and also marketing of your work because no one's going to do it for you. You have to do it.
Oh, no,
You
no.
have to have a website. You have to be able to be on your social media platforms and talking about how great you are. And that's where with the consulting that I do for them as well as a freelancer,
Not
I
arrogantly, not arrogantly, right?
no, not arrogantly, but like,
Just matter of factly.
yes, because no one else is going to do it for you. And that's
No,
one
they're
of the
not.
things that
No,
I
no,
do
no. They're not going
for
to mention your name. Matter of fact, I mean, some of them don't even
no.
want you in the room with them. So, that's another show.
Yes.
So, Naomi, you've mentioned Kirkbride on several occasions. Could you give us a little insight into what the Kirkbride was, a little bit of the history? It closed in
Yes.
2007.
Yes. And so the Kirkbride was a mental institution hospital that was created in the early 1800s and was a location where people who had mental and also physical health issues were able to go and live. They were a self-sustaining community where they had their own farming, fruit trees, agricultural with animals. They did their own canning. They had their own barbershop, beauty shop. They even had their own post office within this Kirkbride building. And
Mhm.
why I refer to as Kirkbride is because Kirkbride is actually the architect who designed this
Right.
type of what they would call asylums when
Mhm.
they created them. And so our Kirkbride is the horseshoe shaped Kirkbride. And I myself, when growing up in Fergus Falls, would go up there when I was a brownie myself, and we would do arts and crafts with our special friends. And it was a place that people could go where they needed to have the mental health help that they needed. And also, it was a huge economic driver for our community as well. It was half or more of the people who lived in Fergus at that time were employed through the state up at that building
Mhm.
because it was such a large facility and they had so many patients as well. But we all know what happens within government systems. They do cuts, and that's what started happening is that they started making cuts, and then the programming got downsized, and then it came to a physical point where they just shut down the building itself and it was done. And then they moved the patients that were up there into local nursing homes, which is another story that we could get into at another time. So it's been a huge transition. And so that's where, even like with the Hinge art residency, that's where we're inviting artists to come in and talking about the process of healing and being within the community, the transition, and that artists are a hinge that, could sway back and forth, taking the past to the future.
You said a lot of the people in the community were employed there. How did it close in 2007? How did it impact the community, the closure?
From my own experience of friends and family who worked there, they had to find a different job. They had to figure out how they were going to make a living. A lot of people had to move out of Fergus because there wasn't enough job opportunity here after it closed. And so it was a huge transition. And to me, it was a huge loss to the community.
So, at what age did you become aware of the term mental health
I learned about
or
that right
mental
away.
or mental illness?
Yeah, I learned about that right away at the age of 5. And it really made me to understand about empathy and about how people need need help, and that there are places that people can go if they need to have a physical rest. I was also explained about how there are certain ways in which people need to have assistance, I was told, being in living assistance, and that couldn't live with their families because they couldn't take care of them, where their family member could be safe and
Mhm.
be taken care of. But there's also the other side of this too, where there was experimentations happening up there. There were lobotomies happening up there. So there's the good and the bad. That's a part of our history, though. I feel as human beings, we experiment with things and we see how far we can take it.
Yeah, sometimes it's taken too far. We met in Denver, Colorado, the Alliance of Artists Communities Conference. Met you and Michelle. You were on the panel, and I told you my sister's name is Naomi, and so I applied for Hinge, and then at the next conference, which was in Philadelphia, I think you pulled me. You asked me some more questions, and I remember you told me that I was awarded the residency, and I was really excited, and so I traveled there in February of 2019. It was snowing. I was surprised because well, I was excited because I got to see the First Avenue nightclub where they shot some of Prince's The Purple Rain at.
Yep.
I wanted to go to Paisley Park, but that didn't happen. But I was surprised because then when I got to Minnesota, St. Paul, I took a bus to where you guys were at. I was surprised to see so many Somalians on the bus, and I was like like where I was going, I was like, I know they don't live in no Fergus Falls. I know they don't live in Fergus. But I was surprised. I didn't know there was a Somalian community in Minnesota. I mean, well, I wouldn't have known. I never had any business there. I don't know the culture and
Your
the
first time,
community.
yeah. This was your first time actually
It's my first
coming
time, and I was really
to
surprised. I
Minnesota.
was
Yeah.
like, wow. It was really quiet around there. It was a little, little it was quiet, and it was snowing. And that hospital, it's big. It was kind of isolating. I remember the apartment building that I was in. I never saw anybody. I don't know if anybody else was in there. The apartment was
Oh,
really
yeah.
nice. The apartment was really nice. But I remember we got together, and I read some of my literature. I read an excerpt of my unpublished memoir, and I had discussed it was based on Rodney King and what happened to him in March of 1991. And I remember we ended up, me, you, and Dominic, we ate at Fiesta Brava. But I remember when I was reading, I remember somebody had giggled. Somebody had started laughing, not laughing like really, 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 really loud. I guess more so like a snicker or something. And I mean, obviously, I didn't stop or whatever. I didn't. I mean, it wasn't funny to me or whatever. I don't think it's not so much how could you laugh. And I know sometimes people do laugh out of nervousness or different reasons. It's not always necessarily they're laughing at the situation. I wasn't expecting that. I had a great time in Fergus Falls. I did some walking around, got some really cool pictures. I think it was my first time walking on a lake. That I mean, I didn't walk on it too
Frozen Lake.
much.
Yep.
Yeah, but that frozen lake, that area was really huge. I think I had wrote something afterwards, and I had said, while some parts of the country are experiencing racial turmoil, I found joy, tranquility, rest, and inspiration in Fergus Falls. I also learned a great deal about life and culture of the Perry. And then later on in 2019, you invited me to be a panelist at the Alliance of Artists Community Conference for your rural residencies, artist engagement panel with Carlton Turner. We were in Minnesota. The conference was in Minnesota that year. Yes, St. Paul. So the interesting thing about all of this was, fast forward to May of 2020, the situation that happened with George Floyd. And I couldn't help but think, about my neighbor, Rodney King, and what happened with him March of 1991. And then, I had just visited your state, your community. Fergus is how far from Minnesota?
But it's from Minneapolis. It's about a 3-hour drive.
3-hour drive.
Mm-hmm.
That's where George Floyd was, right?
Yes. Yep.
So 3-hour drive. I just couldn't help but think about how I was just in your community sharing my story and how that, affected my community in Southern California. I mean, well, not just my community, it ended up affecting the nation. And now here we were almost, I think, some 30 years later, and now here it impacted your state and your community. And
nationally as well again.
And the images and some of the things I was seeing, I was just like, I was in disbelief. I remember I went to Harlem that day to go grocery shopping. I think it was a Monday. And I remember getting off the subway in the Bronx and I saw all these cops in riot gear, but I remember they said we were not going to stop at Fordham in Jerome, where I was going to get off at. And I just assumed, somebody had got shot or, killed or whatever, because it's the Bronx and that happens a lot.
Yeah.
When I got off the subway, I saw the riot cops and I was like, And I think even then I started to hear that the helicopters, I went home by those helicopters, that noise didn't stop, but they had, pretty much looted and vandalized some of the places up in the Bronx. And for me, as a child living in LA, I mean, my mother, she didn't let me out of her eyesight, even though we lived in Pasadena. LA was 14 miles south of where we're at, but some things happened in Pasadena, but not unlike, in LA. Now, my grandmother, the area where my grandmother lived near Pico and Western, we shopped at a J.J. Newberry store, and that store went up in flames, was, looted and riot. They destroyed that. And then they found a body that I think his name was Nusir Muhammad. They weren't quite able to tell how he, passed away, but he, body was burned to death. They were able to ID him. I had just recently seen footage of Mark Brown, who's a popular news anchorman out here in LA. He was revisiting the riots and he was just talking about the general area. And then he cut away to the J.J. Newberry store up in flames.
Both of those stores were going up in flames. And just the idea of all those animals in there, innocent animals burning and dying in there, that really affected me that night, and it still does. And over across the street where that department store is, someone died in there. Look, over there, Gary. J.J. Newberry, somebody just threw a firebomb in there. It is now burning. There apparently is someone trapped inside J.J. Newberry's, the store that you see there where the smoke is pouring out. You saw someone go in and not come out.
Exactly.
The Newberry store burned to the ground. 4 months later, a cleanup crew found the body of 20-year-old Nisar Daoud Mustafa in the rubble. Reporters, cameramen, bystanders, we were all shocked by what we were seeing.
This is greed, anger, and I don't like it.
I've never seen footage of this store that me and my family used to shop at as a child. I couldn't believe what I was looking at. I'd never seen it, and it was around the corner from my grandmother's house in LA, Koreatown. They lit Koreatown up, and it wasn't just for what had happened to Rodney King. Black people were pissed off at what happened to Latasha Harlins. Black men had been getting beaten up by the LAPD. Rodney King was not the first. He obviously is not the last. But you had all of that pain and suffering and the community being ignored and being disrespected. It was only a matter of time that something like that was going to happen. And a lot of people say, oh, they're damaging stores, they're doing this. Something's gonna burn.
Yeah.
I mean, something is going to go up in smoke, whether it be a human body or whether it be a building. You cannot tell people how to react.
You can't
tell people how to react. No.
Anything. That is how everyone's going to have their own reaction and their own way and how they process. And I think that that is something that, you know, everyone needs to remember when things happen within our communities, is that there are also going to be people who have their voices silenced. They're going to find other ways and how they're going to have their voice be heard.
Yeah, it was just, you know, they started spray painting on the buildings, Black and Latino owned. You know, they started cleaning up the community a few days later. I didn't think I would see something like that happen in the Midwest, and then for it to, you know, affect nationally and then globally, the outrage and then the video, most of all the video, you know,
Mhm.
Rodney King, that video was about 8.5 minutes. What that George Floyd video was about 9 minutes too.
Was it
Um,
9 minutes? I've never known how long that is, because I saw the video once when it first happened, and I cried. I couldn't even imagine. And I remember I was sitting on my couch when I first saw it, because with social media, it was everywhere. And the recording was being posted everywhere, which I feel needed to be posted everywhere. And also I feel it was also a call out to all mothers across the nation. I know one of the things that you asked me about, like, how has it affected like the community that I come from? And the thing is that with being 3 hours away, we didn't see any of the physical evidence of how it affected the community. There were ways in which people that were in Minneapolis, St. Paul were out protesting. They were out, you know, having a voice and doing artwork like you and I talked about, where they actually made a shrine that was set up as well for the community to go and visit and to offer things, bring flowers, create murals as well. Um, and for me, it was something that, you know, I asked other colleagues, and I also asked other friends who were living there and was in communication with them. I was like, what can I do for you? What can I help with, as, you know, your community is going through this? And I was there for those people and my friends of mine as well, and also colleagues in that time, and had those conversations.
mhm.
Um, but there has been so much turmoil, I feel, in the United States and for centuries. And I don't have an answer, or I don't even know how communities start to heal after that, Nishan. You've experienced it one on one in person.
Mhm.
Um, and I think it's something that, as individuals and also as people who live within the communities that were affected by it, saw it, experienced it,
Mhm.
you know, heard the cries, heard the screams, even the people who were there when George Floyd was being arrested and died. Uh,
It was 9 minutes and 29 seconds, the video, or
the
yeah.
video, yep,
There's still there's still areas in South Central LA that have not been rebuilt from
really.
when the area, you know, and no, it's not in your best interest to destroy your community. Fast forward to George Floyd, they didn't do much damage in South Central. They went to Beverly Hills, they went to the Mid Wilshire area, they went to the areas that were not, you know, outside of their communities. Obviously, they didn't do as much damage as they did to South Central. That wasn't going to happen. That was not going to happen. Um, it's interesting, as an adult. I'm from Pasadena. I lived in LA, the Mid Wilshire area. This was 20 something years ago, and there was a firestone that had went up in smoke. That it was a firestone. I don't. I didn't look at George Floyd's. I mean, there's no reason for me to look at it. I didn't look at it. Obviously, I seen little clips and, you know, the all the discussions about it and stuff. To me, it's just no point to look at it. Um, Over $20. Was it what? Was it a fake? It was a fake $20 bill, or it was something about $20.
It was something about at the exchange at the store, and I don't even know truly what all happened with it because,
Yeah.
there's so many, but it's over about, yeah, about him being at a store and paying for something.
What did you think about the artwork? What did you think about the artwork that was created?
I think the artwork was a way, from being an artist, but not being one of the artists who actually created artwork there,
Hmm.
from being on the outside and seeing what they created for their community was a way for them to come together as a community and a way to celebrate him as well, and to create these murals and these memorials and to be having the community conversations. And there were community members as well who, you know, after there were people out, who were rioting and stuff, people would get other community members together and they would go and clean up and pick up the areas.
Hmm.
And that is the thing, is like they were for me, I saw how a community was there for each other
Hmm.
and that they were struggling, but also at the same time they found a way with artists, were a way to create work to bring the community together and to have that memorial there as well.
And now there's a big archive of artwork.
Hmm.
Yeah. And like Rodney King, I know that George Floyd also had became the butt of numerous jokes. Yeah. And so what I did was organized some of my friends, writers together, and we hosted a reading of Rodney King's 2012 autobiography, The Riot Within: My Journey from Rebellion to Redemption. Actually, I hosted 3 virtual events going back to 2020, and you had did the control the Zoom. I don't remember what you read. You read something. It was 10 readers across the United States and Canada. We gathered on Zoom and we read his literature. I don't remember what you read though. Mm-hmm.
There was that was actually when we did the Tupac one. I actually read a paragraph from Tupac's book because I was the host and also the Zoom navigator for when you did the
For the
the red.
Riot Within, you read something. You read something of his, right? Or you just
No,
did this?
I
Oh,
was
you didn't?
nope. I was the host that introduced you, and then I also
Oh,
operated the Zoom for all of the other readers that were joining as well.
okay,
And
gotcha.
then
You're the one
and
who
then
introduced me to Zoom.
yes,
Yeah,
yep.
I had never heard of it or knew it. Then I did the Honor in Our Ancestors. You did the Zoom for that too. And then
Correct.
we did the Tupac, his 25th death anniversary tribute. I did the Zoom, but you were reading, you read, because we read from his book. We read from his poetry book, The Roses Grew from Concrete, his 1999 poetry book. And we discussed his impact on culture and society through his words, image, and musical legacy. And that was really, really great.
Yeah.
I still was just blown away at how here, I'm a writer, how I met you, at Denver, and then we kept in contact, and
Mhm.
things were just moving along, and then bam, the pandemic, and then the George Floyd situation. And I was like, wait a minute, I was just there in February, almost a year ago, talking about Rodney King and the LA riots and all of that. And now I, yeah, I, I don't think I still have even processed all of that. Matter of fact, I'm sure I haven't. It's
I don't think everyone has still processed that. I think with the pandemic and everything that has happened and going through the experience of all of it. I'm just going to say all of it because there's so much that, yeah, I don't think
and
there has been to
I'm
process.
seeing, I'm seeing news stories or video clips. It's happening every day, and it's happening to Black, white, Latin, Asian. I mean, they just shot and killed an autistic boy, a Black boy, 15 years old. He had something in his hands and was charging at the cops. And you're just like, I mean, you're a grown man. Even if you're a grown woman, you can't disable. I mean, an adult, okay, but a child, I mean, seriously. And they always say you know, why don't they just shoot him in the foot or the arm or somewhere? Like, no, they're shooting to kill, you know, but the images and just, I mean, it's happening. Like, it's like, what happened to our country? What happened to like, why so much violence? And how much more is it going to be? You know, that head is just spinning and spinning and spinning. It's, and then that trauma, you have all these people who are dealing with rage and anger and depression and post-traumatic stress disorder and, you know, alcoholism and suicide and all that stuff, the fallout from it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it creates this never-ending cycle of not never-ending cycle. Well, yeah, never-ending cycle and a, you know, story of pain. We've been talking about the pandemic. How has the pandemic impacted your life and community?
Well, and I want to talk to you about how, like, you talk about like the pain and processing of that. And that is something that I feel that even from Rodney King, I don't think there has been any healing. I think that there has been a continuation of pain that has been throughout this country. And I mean, even with, you know, the missing and taken Indigenous women, that women are constantly disappearing and no one knows what is happening.
Disappearing in
Disappearing.
in America?
Yeah, human trafficking, yes.
Oh.
Here in America. It is
Indigenous
something,
women?
Indigenous women especially, even young children too. There's so much that we could talk about that has pain and has trauma, and having to go through the pandemic, you know, has just put another layer for many other people who have had to process and to think about certain things that have happened within their community or even personally within their own lives. And with what you just asked me about how has the pandemic been for me, is that, I mean, I battled breast cancer during the pandemic and I had to deal with that process and a surgery with trying to be isolated, but also trying to get help from people. And I also had to homeschool my daughter because my daughter couldn't go to public school because of me battling cancer as well. And from that journey of having to go through that major surgery, healing, and other treatments, I have learned to find the joy and the things that I really want to focus my passion and my creativity and also community on to be a part of what I'm doing. And that's one of the reasons why I also, like, you know, I started another Girl Scout troop. I wanted to have space where kids can come to be kids, but also who can learn in a caring, giving, and safe environment and ask questions. And another reason why I teach and facilitate art workshops is because I love working with youth. And so I create these spaces where people can come and learn. And also, a lot of times they're processing things that through joy, through pain. And so it's something that I myself with the pandemic has really made me understand more of what my purpose is and going through the cancer as well.
Mm-hmm. Did you anticipate that our generation would prioritize mental health issues to the extent that they do today and that it would become a part of the national dialogue?
No, because it's been such like a taboo subject or something that we don't talk about. And for me, I feel with understanding what the Kirkbride was and that it was a mental asylum where people went to get help, you know, that's how it was described to me growing up. And so I knew that it was a place where people could go and get help, and that, you know, mental illness is just like physical illness. It is a illness. And I really do think that as with the pandemic came into play, it really made others and also the nation understand that mental health is just important as physical health, and that it is something that needs just as much funding and support, and that people shouldn't be ashamed of having to get counseling or therapy. It is something that helps us heal and process.
I tell people that emotional support is worth more than silver and gold.
Most definitely.
It just is.
Yeah.
It just,
Mhm.
you know, it just is. How have you navigated through the pandemic's challenges with your daughter and community? I know you've been creating a lot of projects and things. You said doing things with the children.
Yeah. And so for me, right away, when the pandemic hit, it was mostly figuring out how was I going to survive with freelancing, also homeschooling my daughter, and then being a single parent and having to navigate that. I learned my strengths really quick. I didn't have an option. There were a lot of struggles that I went through financially and also personally that has made me who I am today, and also has made me understand that I can be challenged in many ways, but I will always find a solution and where I will thrive. And I know that may sound very
Well, you're a strong ass, and you're a kick-ass mama bear, so I'm not surprised. I'm not
It's about survival. It's about, and that's with the mama bear, it's about the survival. And like, my bear cub is my number one, and she always will be. And a lot of people in my life have learned, and even my mother has learned about my strengths and also my outspokenness, and how I will advocate and stand up is something that might make others feel uncomfortable, but also too, it's like, I'm not going to belittle myself in a room or in a crowd of people just to make other people's feel comfortable. Like, I'm going to be there to challenge and ask those hard questions, because that is one of the purposes and the roles that I have, I feel, and that's the reason why I'm still here.
Let the children play. Was that part of the West Central Initiative?
Yes, that was a project that I actually created a toolkit where we did a visual art project where we went into the childcare centers and also the preschools. Because with the pandemic, childcare providers were stretched to their limits. They were, having their own family issues at home and then having to go in and work at the pandemic. And so I created this toolkit where the children could play. They could actually just come in and play. We would come into the classroom. I would teach them how to use different types of materials, from air dry clay to other objects. And they would create a clay monster, which was their germ monster. And I created a dialogue where they could talk about how the pandemic made them feel, how they felt when they were ill, also about how they could create a story about their germ monster and share it with their family members. And what was so great about that, Nahshon, then, is that incorporating two musicians with me, Chelsea Verhertz and also Justin Ness, were the musicians who came in and played music for them, and they sang songs about germs and not feeling well. And it became something where they could use that as a catalyst to talk to their caregivers about, so that they could have an understanding and start that healing process. And what I found so rewarding is that even the caregivers and the childcare workers who were working at those facilities actually sat down with us and started playing themselves. And some of them actually started crying because it relieved so much of that stress. And like, when I came into the classroom, I was the facilitator. They could have that hour of time off and just play with the kids as to what they wanted to be doing. But they were navigating so many different things as being the caretakers during the pandemic.
But this was not Rainbow Friends, Animal Footprints.
Nope.
That's a different project.
The Rainbow Friends was another project that I did with West Central Initiative and also Smart Growth America out of Washington, D.C., and also Forecast Public Artworks. I was contacted and asked to give a quote to do a project right when the pandemic hit, that early September, to create a toolkit that would have a navigations of letting kids how to get to school in a safe way. Because, they had to be walking, the 6 feet apart. There was that distance that they should be keeping, wearing a mask or a face shield to go to school. And so I created these Rainbow Friends that are animals that have on face shields, have on masks, but they also
multilingual. It's multilingual.
Yep. And it's also a multilingual packet that we created that the teachers could use within the classrooms for the kids to learn about safe ways to be getting to school by riding their bike, walking to school, riding the bus. And then I created these footprints as well from these animals that the kids could follow for walking paths and also for walking circles that they could exercise with and be with their friends.
And now you're creating a comic book based on it.
So we actually just applied for a grant. Won't find out until July of 2024 if we receive the grant. Where our hopes is where I'll be working with an illustrator who will be illustrating the Rainbow Friends that I created and creating a comic book about talking about safe ways for getting to school and different ways in which you can be doing that within rural communities. And that will be bilingual as well.
Is it bilingual or multilingual?
I think that's a good question. Is it bilingual or multilingual?
I feel so stupid now. No, I think
No.
well, bilingual is English and Spanish. Multilingual would be 3 languages, right? Yeah.
So it's
I think, well,
we will make sure that we'd for sure want it to be English, Spanish, and then also Somalian, I know as well, is the third one. Yep.
It's a really big community up there of them, huh?
It is, yeah, because Pelican Rapids has a large Somali community, and then also Fargo Moorhead as well.
Are there any in Fergus?
Yeah, we have Fergus Falls. Yep, here in Fergus, we have families here as well.
Oh, really?
Who are residing, yep, and are great community members. And it's been, for me, I am so thankful because where I do live, we do live in a small community, you know, that we don't have a lot of culture here, but also too, like, we also live by White Earth Reservation, which is up by Detroit Lakes, which is Anishinaabe land as well, and where some of our elders are from, and that Zara and I are connected to.
You mentioned the West Central Initiative. You mentioned the comic book that you're working on, other projects.
If we get the grant, if the grant comes through, yep.
But you didn't mention, well, we didn't discuss the CDC Foundation funded COVID diaries from the local youth. Tell us about the COVID diaries that you worked with Ottertail County, let you say that.
Ottertail County Historical Society, and also the Ottertail County Health Department.
Right.
And Springboard for the Arts. And then I worked with another artist organizer who is Wesley Fawcett-Cray, who is an artist from Arizona. Wesley and I were invited by Springboard for the Arts to work with youth within Ottertail County, and that's the county in which I reside in Minnesota. And Wesley also has, her family has homesteaded here in Ottertail County, so she was invited as the second artist. That is where Springboard for the Arts and Ottertail County Historical Society and the Ottertail County Health Department received funding from the CDC to be doing a project about the pandemic and presenting education and information about COVID. And that is where Wesley and I were able to work with the youth within the county at multiple different high schools. With the students, we helped them to create photography to video work to sculpture pieces about their experience with COVID and what they went through, which is very powerful. And with that exhibition then, you know, we have had it travel to the Minnesota Health Conference that happened in 2022. That was something where I was invited then as well to go there and present and to show them the exhibition and the artwork that the students did. And then I also did a project with the people at the conference where I invited them to write 2-sentence poems, and then I actually put together and drafted together a full poem for them that they took away from that conference. From that project though as well, the Ottertail County Health Department was a nominee for a national award for that project. And this last July of 2023, they were awarded the full award, and they received it for national recognition for that project that we did. Wesley and I were not able to go out for the conference. I really wish we could have. I just couldn't make it work with Zara, and also had some other things happening as well.
Were you guys the only project that got funded with that, or were there other COVID diaries in other states and places?
So there were other states throughout the United States that got funding as well from the CDC to be doing community projects within their own communities, as to where artists and artist organizers came up with their own projects as well to implement and do those projects throughout the United States. Yeah.
Okay. And so we're talking about funding, and as artists, we rely on funding for our projects, for different projects. Back in 2021, November, I had hosted an artist grants panelist with several artists from across the nation. We discussed local, state, and federal arts grant opportunities for individual artists to assist them in learning about funds for creating new works or helping develop their artistry and community development. We presented and discussed topics for writing successful grants, fellowships, implementing impactful projects in communities, and much more. We demystified and provided artists with accessibility and insight into artist grants. You were sick, you weren't able to make it, but Dominic showed up in your place and turned out really, really great. Now, speaking of grants, in 2022, you received a creative support for individuals grant from the Minnesota State Arts Board. The grant made your latest exhibit possible. Which exhibit was that?
It was for two exhibits. It was for Mending What Once Was and also for Beautiful Chaos.
Okay. And that was thanks to a legislative appropriation made possible thanks to a legislative appropriation from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the voters of Minnesota. Since you received your first artist grant, how have artist grants impacted your career over, will we say, 3 decades?
It would be over the 25 years, I would say,
Almost.
as a professional. Yep. Because, and the reason why I say that is because in college, I as well already started getting fellowships and grants to be able to attend the universities that I did. And then also got special funding as well after undergrad to go and do certain residencies, and after graduate school as well, got grants and fundings. That is one thing that people are just like mysterious about like, how do artists survive? Like, and it's all like, we have to work hard for the grants and the fundings that we apply to. Not only that, after you get the grant, you have to do the work, you have to create it, you have to implement it, put it out in the community, promote it. And then, and then after that, you have to write a final report. Like, it's not just that we get handed over this money and we get to make our artwork. There's a full-on application process. We go through a jury panel. They critique it. You may get it, you may not.
The applications can take 40, 50, 60, 70 hours.
Yeah, even more. And then you have a waiting period to even find out if you've received the grant or the fellowship.
6 to 9 months sometimes.
Yep. And so
and then there may be no
process.
And there may not even be any crumbs left for you on the table.
No.
Not even a fork or a spoon. There's no seat there's no seat for you at this table. They say hit the road, Jack.
Yes. And that is, I mean, that is one thing that I always remind artists of, is that like, I'm like, this is not guaranteed. Like, yeah, you're applying to this and you're putting in all this time and effort, especially for artists when they're starting just first out applying, especially with my consulting. And I'm like, you can't rely on this. Like, you need to be applying for this, but you can't rely on it because it's not guaranteed.
Oh, no. And the artist grant panel that we had, demystifying artist grants, that Dominic was a part of, I think it's gotten like 600 views because it's on my YouTube channel. So people have checked it out. So what advice would you have for an artist considering moving to Minnesota?
I would say it would be one of the smartest things you would do, because Minnesota is the second largest funded state in the United States for the arts. New York is number 1. Because of the legislative funding that you spoke of with the individual artist career grant, I actually have received 2 of those from the state of Minnesota, which I'm very fortunate for, is funding that if you are a Minnesota resident, you can apply for that state funding. But also too, where you live, you also have your regional art council, which is funding that gets trickled down from the legislative into the smaller pockets of communities throughout Minnesota to the local art councils. And then they have grants as well that artists can apply for creative development, all the way to community projects and nonprofit organizations. There's national funders as well who supply grants here. McKnight is one, Jerome is another, some of the big names. And it is a arts thriving community. It is a way in which the arts thrive here. That's why we have that legislative money, because the citizens of Minnesota voted on putting money back into the arts, and also its national environments. About the park that I talked about, Glendalough, is funded through the legislative funding as well.
It's tax funds.
Correct.
Where does Minnesota make the most of their profits? Is it with agriculture or farming or?
I would say within agriculture being actual land farming, and then also in with larger corporations like 3M, also General Mills, some of the larger, and then also hospital institutions. The University of Minnesota, which is a large hospital institution, is in Minneapolis. And so those are some of the big economic drivers, but also there are some factories as well that reside for more rural communities to be able to employ people.
The Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund receives 19.75% of the sales tax revenue resulting from the Legacy Amendment to support arts education, and arts access, and to preserve Minnesota's history and cultural heritage. Based on a current sales tax revenue, Minnesotans will invest more than $1.2 billion in Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund projects and programs over the 25-year life of the tax.
Yes.
So if an artist is thinking about moving to Minnesota, that's the place to hit it to.
Yes. And what is the other thing that needs to be mentioned about that too is that when these art programmings of theater, plays, exhibitions, live music, concerts, when people go out to those, they also go out to eat. They go and shop at other businesses. They go on trips. They stay in hotels. And so it's creating more economic development for those communities by utilizing the arts itself.
What's the most rewarding aspect for you in regards to being an artist?
Being able to, this may sound like not that big of a thing, but being able to share my ideas and my thoughts, which I think is the most rewarding, because I feel that everyone's own personal experiences are so valid and need to be shared. It's a part of history, it's a part of our culture, it's a part of who we are. And with us being able to share those stories and share those objects through creativity, being through writing, storytelling, film, painting, sculptures, installations, it's a way, music, words are a way of us being able to talk about our history, our pain, our joy in ways that others may not be able to experience it.
So you did the COVID diaries. For the young people, did you do any creative writing in a journal over the past few years, over everything?
Yeah,
Oh,
I wrote, I do write. I don't share it with people though.
Oh,
I
okay.
have journals that my daughter will inherit with my current art collection that I have been collecting for the past 20 years. She will inherit those journals as well. And there is one passage that I wrote though the day before I went in for my bilateral mastectomy for the cancer, that I wrote, and I don't remember writing it. And I'll actually go back and read it because it was a time that I had never been so scared before in my whole entire life. And I've been in some pretty stressful situations that I have shared with you in the past. And that night, I was with my mom and my daughter, but I also took the time to actually write in my journal and to share how I was feeling. And I don't remember it, nahshon. It's like an out of body experience.
What's next for you? Do you have an exhibition going on right now? Is there one coming up this spring, summer? What's happening?
No, yeah, I have a piece right now at the Art of the Lakes Art Gallery, which is in Battle Lake. I was just juried in as well to the 15-year anniversary at the Cadets Gallery. And then I have an invitation where I am going to be in the exhibition for the Midwestern Invitational for the Rourke Art Museum. And then I also just got another invitational as well for a local art exhibition as well for local artists here in Fergus Falls. I am creating some new pieces that I haven't really talked about yet that are in my studio that will hopefully be for my next solo exhibition as I'm transitioning and working on those. And when I work on my artwork, I work on multiple things at once. I just can't concentrate on one thing. I'm always making multiple pieces at the same time, working on them, going back, letting them rest, and then working on something and going back to it. So
Okay. Now this was great. Thank you. Thank you for being my guest. Appreciate your support and hope that you enjoy the rest of your Women's History Month.
Thank you so much, Nahshon. I'm honored that you asked me to be interviewed, and thank you for taking the time for having this conversation and asking me these great questions and these heartfelt questions. I so appreciate you, and I'm so grateful for you.
And I still got to get out there one day at some point to get some of that deer salt, the deer. And I want to go.
Yeah.
I want to go by that lake. That would be fun. That would be a lot of fun.
Glendalough is beautiful.
How do you pronounce it?
Glendalough.
Glendalough. Naomi, I will talk to you later. Take care. Okay.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.